The desert wind carried dust like smoke across the lonely town of Dry Creek. A place where lawmen seldom lingered, where whiskey was cheaper than water, and where desperate men came to barter away their last hope. That evening, when the sun bled red against the horizon, a ragged cowboy named Eli Mercer rode in with a hollow stomach, a tattered coat, and one coin left rattling in his pocket. It was all he had between him and starvation. That last dollar should have gone to bread, or maybe to a bed, but fate had a cruel way of steering a man. Just outside the saloon, beneath the crude lantern strung from the wooden awning, a crowd gathered. Their voices were sharp, their laughter coarse, their eyes hungry, not for whiskey, not for cards, but for a girl. She stood chained at the wrists, her long black hair falling across her face like a curtain of midnight. Her eyes, dark, burning, untamed, swept over the mob without flinching. She was Apache, no more than 18, dragged here by traders who spoke of her like she was livestock. They said she was strong, obedient if broken right, and would fetch a fair price. Eli's chest tightened. He had seen such auctions before. Women stripped of their spirit, sold into kitchens, beds, or worse. He should have turned away. He had no money to meddle in matters that could get a man killed. But her stare locked onto his, just once, just long enough that he felt the ground shift beneath his boots. $1, barked the trader, smirking at the pitiful crowd. Who'll give me $1 for the girl? Worth 10 times that, $1 to start. A few men spat on the ground. Others chuckled, shaking their heads. Times were lean, and no one wasted good silver on a mouth to feed. Eli's hand trembled as it touched the lone coin in his pocket. He knew it was madness. He couldn't even feed himself. Yet his voice, rough from dust and whiskey, broke through the murmurs. $1. The crowd roared with laughter. The trader's eyes widened, then narrowed. But he smacked the girl's shoulder and shoved her forward. Sold. And just like that, Eli Mercer, broken half-starved, found himself the owner of an Apache girl. He expected gratitude, maybe even fear, but as the chain was slapped into his hand, she looked up at him with a defiance that cut like steel. No words, just the kind of gaze that asked what kind of man he truly was. Eli muttered, "Reckon we best get out of here," and pulled her toward the edge of town before anyone changed their mind. They camped that night under the hollow shadow of a mesquite tree. The stars stretched endless above them. Eli built a small fire, careful not to draw too much smoke, and offered her the last of his jerky. She refused, her chin high, as if eating from his hand would be another kind of chain. Finally, she spoke, her voice sharp, accented, yet strong. "You think you own me now?" Eli shook his head. "Don't own nobody. Just didn't want them vultures talkin', you." She studied him, her eyes narrowing like she was weighing his soul. "Then why chain me still?" Eli glanced down at the iron cuff biting into her wrist. He had forgotten he still held the chain. Slowly, carefully, he pulled his knife and cut the links free. The clatter of iron on rock echoed louder than thunder in the silence of the desert. Her eyes softened, not with gratitude, but with something deeper. She rubbed her wrist, then whispered, "Freedom is not given. It is taken." For a long time, neither spoke. The fire cracked. Coyotes wailed in the distance. Eli felt the weight of his empty belly, his empty pockets, his empty life. He had spent his last dollar, not to save himself, but to save her. He couldn't tell if he was a fool or something else. At dawn, she was still there. She could have vanished into the desert night, but instead she sat across from him, watching the sunrise with quiet strength. "My name is Nayeli," she said finally. "Eli," he replied. The days that followed blurred into a strange rhythm. Eli tried to head north, hoping for work, but the land was merciless. Water was scarce, and bandits roamed freely. More than once, he thought he had doomed them both. But Nayeli knew the desert like no map ever could. She found roots, berries, and streams hidden in dry gulches. She read the tracks of snakes and rabbits, guided them to shelter before storms rolled in. Eli realized she wasn't a burden. She was survival itself, but trouble has a way of tracking desperate souls. One evening, as they neared a canyon, 3 riders appeared from the ridge. Guns glinted in the fading sun. They were the same traders who had sold Nayeli, angry, drunk, and grinning like wolves. Well, the leader drawled. "Looks like our merchandise ran off with a skinny cowboy. Thought you could steal from us, Mercer." Eli stepped forward, hand near his revolver. "Ain't your merchandise. She's free." The men laughed, cruel and hollow. "Free? An Apache girl? You must have lost your damn mind." Nayeli's hand brushed Eli's arm, steadying, grounding. She whispered, "Freedom is fought for." The riders drew their pistols. Eli fired first. The crack split the canyon air. One man tumbled from his horse. Another shot grazed Eli's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He'd tasted blood and dust, but he didn't fall. Nayeli moved like lightning, hurling a stone that struck the second rider square in the temple. He dropped with a grunt. The last one fled, cursing, into the horizon. Breath ragged, Eli dropped to his knees. Nayeli tore strips from her dress to bind his wound. As she worked, her hands firm and unshaking, he realized she was not the one who needed saving. He was. That night, as they rested by a stream, Eli whispered, "I bought you with my last dollar, but you gave me something I never had." Nayeli looked up, firelight reflecting in her dark eyes. "What? Reason to keep living." For the first time, she smiled. Not wide, not soft, but real. Weeks turned to months. Word spread of a ragged cowboy and an Apache girl carving their own path across the frontier. They worked odd ranches, hunted wild game, and kept moving, always moving, because freedom was fragile and the world was cruel. But together, they learned that chains, iron or otherwise, could be broken. Years later, old men in saloons would whisper about Eli Mercer, the fool who spent his last dollar on a girl no one else wanted. They'd say he died poor, wandering, nameless. But out in the desert, where the stars watched silently, there were trails marked by two sets of footprints. One of a man who thought he was saving a girl, the other of a girl who showed him that freedom was not something bought or given, but lived. And when the wind carried the sound of laughter across the canyons, those who listened close swore it was not sorrow, but triumph. Eli Mercer had gambled his last coin, and in doing so, he had won the only thing worth winning, a life unchained.